everybody, and welcome back to the brand new North Carolina Sports Network and this new look version of the David Glenn Show. Thank you very much for being with us today. We just returned from the North Carolina coast, specifically Wilmington, Southport, St. James near Oak Island. We are actually headed to Charlotte next week, more on that shortly, and we're coming at you today from here at our DG Show headquarters in Raleigh. That beach-style art behind me is because I like to be at the beach, mentally and emotionally, as often as possible, even when I am here in the capital city of Raleigh. We here at the new North Carolina Sports Network will continue to travel the state from the mountains to the beaches and everywhere you'd want to live in between, in the hope of becoming one of your regular sources for compelling coverage of our great state's people, places, events, and of course, sports. Speaking of sports, 1 week after Hurricanes legend and coach Rod Brind'Amour joined us for an extended and extremely personal visit as one of the most impactful and successful professional sports figures in our state's history, one of the most impactful and successful college athletes in our great state's history, will be our guest in just a few minutes. He's someone whose name, more than 3 decades after he finished playing his college ball here in North Carolina, is still number 2 in the all-time NCAA record books in one very important category. And he's someone who played for one of the most famous coaches in our state's amazing sports history. Much more on this week's special guest shortly. There have been literally thousands of hours of the David Glenn Show posted in podcast form over the last 2 decades, when this show grew to become statewide here in North Carolina, and for more than a decade, the biggest sports radio program in the history of the entire Mid-Atlantic. But today's edition is just our second as a member of the brand new North Carolina Sports Network. And while we've been a guest on dozens of others' radio and TV shows and podcasts during and after the pandemic, and we hope to continue those things, this is just our second as a host in quite some time. That's why we'll be shouting out our new sponsors from time to time, because without them and without your support, this new venture truly would not have been possible. Speaking of your support, a quick reminder right out of the gate, you can really help us by clicking the subscribe button next to this video. It is free, it is easy, and you will be helping us in a very important way without having to pay for a subscription or otherwise reach into your pocket on our behalf. This past weekend, talk about the power of subscribing. My wife and I, yes, the lovely and talented Maria, took the 2-hour drive from Raleigh to the Wilmington area, in part to thank in person 2 viewers, listeners, consumers, if you will, who were among the first 500 subscribers to this brand spanking new YouTube channel. Pete and Peg could have opted for Panthers football tickets this fall, or Carolina Hurricanes hockey tickets this winter, or a Charlotte Hornets game next season, or a variety of other options from professional and college sports here in North Carolina. They actually live on a golf course in the greater Wilmington area, so they don't need to opt for free golf or any of the other cool prizes from our well-stocked prize closet. Instead, they chose to join Maria and me for dinner and a concert, and we all had a great time. As I say hello to our producer today, J.R. Quitman, remember, symbolic of our statewide platform, born and raised in Asheville, great city in the mountains, currently in Wilmington, great city at the beach, and former Wolfpack football player in Raleigh, North Carolina. JR, good to see you again. It was my maiden voyage to see, in this case, Michael Franti. Not my first Franti concert, but it was my maiden voyage to what you had told me a little bit about, Greenfield Lake Amphitheater, which for folks who haven't been there, if you're near the Triangle, Cocoa Booth Amphitheater in Cary is a little bit like it, but it's small, it's outdoors, it's just a little south of downtown Wilmington. Right. And it was a truly unforgettable experience as the sun was going down. You got the lake there, you got the trees forming a little kind of semicircle and part of the amphitheater. Michael Franti happens to be one of my all-time favorite performers, JR. We all had an absolute blast and enjoyed meeting 2 of our subscribers. But credit to you for painting the picture, man. I know you've visited there. I don't know how much of a music guy you are, but I recommend it highly. The company was great. The music was great, but the venue is one I'm going to return to.
Oh, gotcha, man. I'm glad you had a good time. Yeah, I've been there, but only for work purposes. So, but I've heard, from the video that we've recorded and everything at work, everything just sounds so good there. And I am a music guy. I am wearing a Pink Floyd shirt right now.
Nice. Pink Floyd.
I love.
That's more from my generation. I like when you go throwback on me. That's cool.
Right. Yeah, my dad loved music. He had a very open mind when it came to music. Good music is good music no matter the genre, right? So
amen to that.
Yeah,
and the cool thing about Greenfield Lake is if the performer wants to jump down either into the mosh pit or even walk up and down the aisles or get on a little mini stage halfway back, they can do that as Franti did. And if you're hoping to see a buddy of yours, like if you're at a 20,000 seat venue and you hope to bump into your buddy who you know is going, it's probably not going to happen, or at least it's a low percentage play. I knew a few people were going. I saw all of them. I mean, it's not hard to wave across a few hundred people to the other side of the arena. So great to be in your neighborhood. I hope to see you in person next time.
Yeah, definitely.
But that whole trip is a reminder that the only way you, our viewer, our subscriber, our listener, our reader at ncsportsnetwork.com, the only way you can be eligible to become a winner here on the David Glenn Show is to help us build our subscriber numbers. So again, it's free, it's easy, it's an important part of building this new business model, which is not corporate media, not legacy media. That's why we really need your help in a grassroots kind of way. And for us to be able to continue with top-notch content, the more you support us, the more more quickly we'll be able to grow. As I always like to remind people, if you win, your prize does not have to include me, as this past week's winners chose to include me in their prize. I do get suspicious if people who win request Maria, but not me. I'm a little leery about that, even as I completely respect the thought process to bring Maria somewhere and leave me out. I get it. #respect. But I do get a little suspicious. If you think it would be cool to meet the host, great. If not, no worries. In those scenarios, if you win, and again, you got to subscribe to win, we just send you the tickets or the certificates, and you can take a friend or sometimes multiple friends to that big game or that special dinner or that unforgettable concert or that round of golf or whatever your selection from the prize closet might be. Okay, on to North Carolina sports of the day, and then today's special guest here on the David Glenn Show. Believe it or not, NFL preseason games are less than 1 month away. Your Carolina Panthers, now led by head coach Frank Reich, formerly of the Indianapolis Colts, and #1 overall draft pick Bryce Young, the Alabama quarterback who led the Crimson Tide to the national championship in 2020 and then won the Heisman Trophy in 2021. Those Panthers will host Aaron Rodgers and the New York Jets. Still feels weird to say that out loud. On Saturday, August 12th, at Bank of America Stadium in Charlotte. The Panthers' official training camp actually begins next week, meaning Wednesday, July 26th, across the border at Wofford College in Spartanburg, South Carolina, not too far from Charlotte, of course. Camp will continue through August 9th and 10th, when the Panthers will have joint practices with the Jets for 2 days leading into that August 12th preseason game against each other right there in Charlotte. Of course, Carolina Panthers guests will be among those visiting us here on the David Glenn Show. Meanwhile, college football gets underway next week in a different way. Although we are still more than a month away from actual games in college football, preseason practice is only weeks away, and preseason media events are actually already officially underway in the Southeastern Conference and some other places. In just a few days, Mike Waddell of the North Carolina Sports Network and I will be bringing this new venture, NCSN, and this new look version of the David Glenn Show to Charlotte for the ACC's annual football media event, which I've been attending regularly for probably 3 decades. The event nowadays is a 3-day extravaganza, Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday, that includes kind of a State of the Union address of sorts from ACC Commissioner Jim Phillips, plus the opportunity for one-on-one interviews with all 14 ACC head football coaches and dozens of the conference's top players. More on that a little bit later in today's show. Our upcoming trip to Charlotte, speaking of sponsors, from here in Raleigh, is brought to you by Jim Dorsett, Jody Hatley, and the rest of our friends at XL Moving and Storage. These are great guys and huge sports fans who run a very successful and reliable Moving and Storage Company. So when we're traveling, we think of them. If you want to support our new version of the David Glenn Show, please choose XL Moving and Storage for your moving and storage needs. You may not be in a position to be a show sponsor yourself, but we all have moving and storage needs at some point. When you do, please visit excelms.com. That's XL Moving and Storage at excelms.com. Quick reminder from our friends at the North Carolina Pork Council, and then college basketball legend Chris Corchiani, Coach Jim Valvano's record-setting point guard at North Carolina State University on the other side. No matter who your favorite team is, we can all agree that North Carolina is the barbecue capital of the world. The North Carolina Pork Council is proud to represent thousands of family farmers who responsibly produce the barbecue, bacon, and other pork products that are so well loved across North Carolina and around the world. Learn more at ncpork.org. Our next guest is among my favorite people and among my favorite sports figures from my 35 years watching and covering sports here in North Carolina. As a high school superstar in the Miami area, he was named to the prestigious McDonald's All-American and Parade All-American teams. As a three-time All-ACC point guard at NC State, he became the first player in Division I college basketball history to accumulate 1,000-plus career assists. And more than 3 decades later, he still ranks number 2 on that list, behind only Bobby Hurley of Duke, one of his ACC contemporaries. His 1989 team, under legendary coach Jim Valvano, still ranks as the most recent Wolfpack squad to capture the ACC's regular season or tournament championship. A 1991 draft pick of the Orlando Magic, he played 3 seasons in the NBA before continuing a very successful pro basketball career with 8 additional seasons in Italy, Turkey, Spain, and Germany. After retiring from pro basketball about 20 years ago, he has been a successful business person in Raleigh, across the state of North Carolina. He's also an occasional visitor to the coast, Wilmington, Wrightsville Beach, and otherwise. And along the way, he became the proud father of 4. He remains a huge supporter of all things NC State. Chris Corchiani, welcome to the brand new North Carolina Sports Network for the first time. And welcome back to the David Glenn Show for probably the 100th time. How are you, man?
Doing great, DG. First of all, congratulations. Very excited to follow where your trajectory goes. Everything you do turns to gold. So certainly excited to watch that. Your introduction, thank you very much. I had goosebumps just listening, and you always make me feel special. So thank you.
Well, I appreciate you right back, man. Tell us, because we are a statewide show, after 4 years at NC State, gave you a taste of the state of North Carolina, but then you have an entire decade traveling first our country, then the world as a pro basketball player. You could have settled in South Florida, where you played high school ball. You could have settled in the Philly or Jersey area, where you have other roots. I'm wearing a Phillies jersey in your honor today. You could have even settled overseas if you wanted to, in one of those great countries I mentioned. Why did you decide to make the state of North Carolina your home, and why have you put these roots down here specifically over the last 20-plus years?
I'll tell you, David, when I first came to North Carolina in 1987, it didn't take me long to realize this is where I wanted to be. All things in my life go back to NC State, and NC State has been a pillar, a foundation. It gave me an opportunity to play in the greatest conference in college basketball, but it also gave me an opportunity to get a degree, something that I don't take lightly. And, I owe everything to NC State. And so I said, when I'm finished playing, this is where I want to be. I want to be around the university, around the athletics program. And it's not just basketball. I enjoy all sports, and I support all sports. And I can't thank NC State enough for what it did in my 4 years, developing me as not only a basketball player, but a young man.
If we go back to the first time you and your name hit our radar in this state, you are that prep All-American in Florida, big-time scorer, of course, big-time assist man. I don't know your long entire list of scholarship offers, but I know it's safe to say you could have gone a lot of different places. Some people want to jump to the conclusion, hey, Valvano, hey, Corchiani, it was a match made in heaven from the start. What do you recall about those recruiting days, and what kind of tilted the scales in favor of the Wolfpack?
Well, when you're being recruited, you're being sent letters and phone calls, and at some point you have to narrow it down. And I knew I wanted to play in the ACC, but being from the state of Florida, I had to give Florida and Florida State an opportunity. Their programs at the time weren't at the level that they were in years to come. But wanting to play in the ACC, it came down to Virginia, Duke, and NC State. And, Duke at the time, a lot of people might not realize this, but they weren't the program. Coach K was just getting going. In '87, they had the one team that went to the Final Four, but it wasn't the Duke the way we think of Duke now. And Virginia, I really liked Coach Terry Holland, liked the program, liked the university. But when Coach B got in the mix, he was so magnetic. I was so excited, when he would call or he would come on a home visit. There was something that just attracted me to him, his charisma, his excitement, the fact that he really cared about me, not only as a player, but as a man. And it ended up being a fairly easy decision. We talked it over, and one thing led to another. And there's a lot of decisions you make in your life that impact you the rest of your life. And my decision to go to NC State and join Coach Valvano was the best decision I ever made.
Because you and I are similar ages, it's easy for me to picture what the world looked like when you were coming out of high school. So folks have to remember, Florida State was not yet a member of the ACC.
That's
so
right.
when Corch gave the Seminoles a look, it was not an ACC option. That actually happened, I think, soon after you turned pro. And of course, Jimmy V had his title already in '83. Coach K had none of his 5 titles that came later at Duke. So it's funny how those planets aligned that way for you.
Yeah.
To Coach V, he's back in the news, right? He's been gone for 30 years now, which feels weird just to say out loud. But you will eternally be his last point guard. And just last week, ESPN releases a new documentary about his famous ESPY speech in March of 1993. And of course, he wasn't with us much longer after that speech. Were you able to see the new documentary entitled The Speech, I think? And if so, what did you think as somebody who probably knew most of the stories that went into that documentary?
It was 1 hour of goosebumps, chills, tears. Even though a lot of people have seen the speech and seen a lot of the footage of Coach V, when it was replayed the other night and the interviews they had with Coach K and Pam Valvano and Jamie Valvano and Dick Vitale, it was special. And the thing that I think Coach V would be so happy and proud of is the legacy, not on the basketball court that he left, but what he has done for cancer research and his Jimmy V Foundation. It's amazing when someone passes away and they are a big star and he won a national championship. But what his legacy has done upon his passing is just amazing.
It is incredible. The V Foundation has raised countless millions. And the way they do things there, when people donate, it goes straight to the people who need it. The money goes straight to the people who need it. So that is obviously a legacy that is literally going to last forever. So if I remember correctly, your timetable, you weren't yet in Europe. You were in the NBA. The ESPY speech happens. I'll never forget the words, man. Like if I'm at a weird time in life, I'll think never give up. I'll think if you laugh and you cry and you think, man, that's a full day. I mean, these are things I don't even have the greatest memory, Chris, but that's 1993 and it still rings in my ears. Were you dialed in to watch the ESPYs that night? Were you on the road with one of your NBA teams? Did you hear about it later? Because, I mean, if you looking at that TV screen, as much as I loved and admired Jimmy V, your personal relationship must have made it that much more magical.
Yeah, unfortunately, I was over actually in Italy.
Okay.
And, I didn't know a lot about it. I obviously was brought up to speed very quickly after that speech and how magnificent it was. And Coach V going back to Reynolds, a place that many thought he might never appear there again, was just spectacular to see the outpouring of fans, ex-players, and then for him to just knock it out of the park was amazing. And that's what, I mean, he always rose to the occasion, whether it was a big game, a big speech, not feeling well. Again, that's all of what made Coach V so special.
1993, you couldn't just flip your laptop and hit the click button and watch the speech, right? No smartphones. It was a little different to find that speech.
You know, the thing is, people don't understand, when I was over in Europe for 8 years, the internet was just getting going.
Yeah.
Very slow. You didn't have everything. These players now that go overseas, it's like living, you know, in another county in North Carolina. It's amazing. But yeah, it was a little difficult, you know, knowing exactly what was going on back home, just because you were very far removed back in the early 90s.
Chris Corchiani is joining us on the David Glenn Show. You entered NC State at the same time as another McDonald's All-American guard, Rodney Monroe. I have read from the great work of Tim Peeler and others that before y'all played your first game together for the Wolfpack, and of course you go on to become one of the great nicknames in college basketball history, Fire and Ice. For those who don't know, this guy, he's mellow as an older guy, but he was the Fire, especially as a young guy. I enjoyed watching him play with some swagger back then. But you and Rodney, pre all this success, actually got into some on-the-court fist fights as new teammates. What happened?
It was really incredible. We both came in as guards that Coach V recruited. You know, it wasn't, you're going to be the point guard, you're the shooting guard, you guys are going to be a tandem. So we were playing a pickup game. We had been on campus probably for 2 or 3 weeks, and you know, we were playing on court 2 in Carmichael. That was where all the great games were played. And Rodney called a foul. I didn't think it was a foul. We started going at it. And in my career, I got in a lot of scuffles here and there, but never was it like a 3-round bout. So we went at it, threw some punches, and kind of waited. DG, I was like, is somebody going to break this up? Or is it on 30, 45 seconds? And finally, it got broke up. About 2 plays later, I go in for a layup. Rodney fouls me hard. We go at it again.
Oh.
We actually got after it 3 different times. The third time, Chucky Brown tried to break it up, and one of us accidentally hit him. And he said, now you guys are going to be fighting me. You got a big one. So, and I'll never forget that night being called up to Coach V's office. And he had Rodney and I both in his office. And he said, you know, are you guys idiots? You know, what are you doing? What are you thinking? You guys are going to be a backcourt together for 4 years. You guys need to kind of grow together. You need to let this go. And at the time, you know, we were just looking at playing time and really kind of saying, you know, this is my turf. And Rodney is very laid back, but he is a unbelievable competitor. And this is something that I think in the long run really benefited us because we both had mutual respect for one another.
If we fast forward, you and Rodney both have your jerseys raised into the rafters and honored by NC State. Hard to believe that was 20 years ago now in 2003. But you guys will forever be known as Fire and Ice. What is as you said in other interviews, most nicknames don't stick, right? Whether they're from childhood or a teammate tries to give it to you or a coach, it just feels like more than half the time they don't stick. We're an eternity later, and people still talk about you as Fire and Ice. When do you remember hearing that phrase for the first time? And was it one of those things that they actually ran by you guys to see if you liked it, or did you just learn about it like the rest of us?
And that was funny. It was our sophomore year, and Mark Bockelman was the sports information director, and he dubbed us Fire and Ice. We weren't asked, is this okay? Do you like it? And I mean, it didn't take long for that to really catch fire, no pun intended, but it just kind of, it just spread like wildfire, and the announcers started using it, and the fans started, having signs, and it just kind of went on and on. It wasn't something we ever really thought about, but it really connected us from that point all the way to current, and I told you earlier, I could be walking down the street and somebody will holler, "Hey, fire!" So it's one of those things that you don't think is going to last. It was just something that kind of paired our personalities together with a kind of phrase, and it has lasted a lot longer than I would have ever imagined. But being with Rodney, having our jerseys retired or honored at the PNC back in 2003, one of the great memories that I'll ever have, because again, NC State meant so much to me. To be able to have that number up in the rafters is something that I cherish.
One of my favorite aspects of Fire and Ice, of course, you become famous because people see you on TV. They love your style of play. There's this beautiful combination of the point guard and the shooting guard. But just as a human being, one aspect of the story that's not on TV, but I love as much as the basketball part, walk us through. You guys after the fighting, you become close and you're great teammates. Obviously, the chemistry is there. But as it turns out, you guys, as retired professional basketball players, you're businessmen, but your playing days are over. Your relationship is actually in some ways closer now. And my sense back when you were playing together was you weren't hanging out on Saturday nights together, even as you got along on the court. Tell us that story, because I think there's a lot of folks a little younger than us, probably a little older than us, that can appreciate that evolution.
We had that altercation our freshman year, and it really we took a step back. We again had mutual respect, but we weren't looking to hang out after the game. And Rodney kind of do his thing, and I did my thing. Even into our sophomore, junior, senior year, we had an unbelievable kind of connection on the court, but it didn't translate off the court. We were friends. We didn't have problems, but it wasn't a real tight bond until we were both over in Europe, and we would stay in contact, and we would get our families and kids together whenever it was a possibility. And we just kind of grew, and it evolved over time to today, it's a very, very special relationship. Rodney sends me and Tom Gugliotta both a text every morning. It's a prayer. And that kind of connects us, and we'll ask, how the families are doing or how the kids are doing. And Rodney's a coach in right outside of Charlotte in Huntersville. And I've gone to some of his practices, and I've gone to some of his games. And years ago, I would go there, and we would play pickup basketball with some of his kids and some older guys. So it's an unbelievable relationship that didn't seem like it had wheels early on. And he's just a tremendous friend, a tremendous teammate. And, I cherish very dearly what that relationship, has evolved into.
So, Coach, you just briefly mentioned Tom Gugliotta, your former Wolfpack teammate there. And this aspect of life cracks me up. I wonder if it happens to you. So I think of you as the great basketball player. I think of you as a super dad of 4 and a family man. And I've gotten to know you as a businessman, and we've seen each other at sporting events. You're a super fan. So these are the way I think of Chris Corchiani, among others, and a great guy, obviously. I wonder how many times when people encounter you, they say, "I'll never forget the time Carl Hess threw you and Googs out of the college basketball game." Like that, it's just so you can be remembered for 99 great things, but most people will also remember, hopefully not to the exclusion of those other things, but that'll be the first thing they think of. Does that happen?
It's all the time, David. I would like to think that, my 4 years of playing in the ACC and having some good, successful teams. The 2 things I'm most known for is, 1, wearing a unitard, I get that about 50% of the time. I get, hey, I remember you got thrown out. You and Googs got thrown out. And I'm thinking, well, how about the time we beat Duke and the time we went to the Sweet 16? But it's funny. That was a very, very unique time. And to this day, I will say that we never did anything. I mean, anything. We were sarcastic. If we were one thing, we were sarcastic. Never cursed, never threatened them. And Carl, and a lot of people don't know this, Carl's son was a really good baseball player, and he was on campus with Elliot Avent. And Carl asked Elliot, I'd like to call Chris and Rodney, or I'm sorry, Chris and Tom. Do you have their number? So Elliot gave our numbers to Carl, and I called Rodney, or I keep saying Rodney. I called Tom. I said, Tom, we might be getting a phone call from Carl Hess. He's with Elliot Avent. And Tom said, yeah, he can call me, but I'm not really wanting to talk. So he ended up calling me, and I said, I appreciate you calling and reaching out. I said, but I'm curious, what did we do that? And he said, Tom stood up and he felt threatened. And I said, well, I disagree with you, but I do appreciate the phone call. About 10 minutes later, Tom calls me. He says, yeah, Carl called me, and the conversation was real short because I wasn't. So I appreciated the call. I don't know if Tom did as much as I did.
Chris Corchiani is joining us on the David Glenn Show. One more thing about that great time with the Wolfpack. As legend has it, when Coach V leaves the Wolfpack, you were so emotional and fiery that your first instinct is, I'm done with this place. And then I know you ultimately ended up just cherishing the way Les Robinson enabled your senior year to play out. But in the moment, I mean, your guy is gone from the Wolfpack. If I was that age, I'd have probably been all fired up and out of my mind. How did you process through that? Because I know Jimmy V was part of your decision to stay.
Yeah, there's no doubt. That was a very uncomfortable year. That was my junior year, and we battled that with Coach V all year long. And he always had a saying. He'd say, we're in this together. When we're in this locker room, this is precious, and we got to stick together, and we're going to get through this. And at the very end, the way the administration just caved, and they didn't even wait for the dust to settle. They just jumped on it, wanted them gone. And it was very disheartening for everything that Coach V did for the university, not only the basketball program, but the university. I really felt that I didn't want to be a part of that. And I, was granted an opportunity to talk to other universities, and I started being recruited by a number of schools. And all of a sudden, I got a phone call one day, and Coach B wanted to meet with me. And he knew nothing of this. This was nothing that I had discussed with him. It was something that I thought at the moment was what I wanted to do. And I went up to a Pizza Hut on Western Boulevard and met Coach V. And when I got there, he said, Chris, what are you doing? Don't do this for me. You have teammates. You have Wolfpack fans. You owe it to yourself to stay there. And if you're doing it for me, you're doing it for the wrong reason. And he convinced me to take my name out of the transfer option and stay for my senior year. Again, you mentioned it. I was blessed to have Les Robinson for 1 year as a coach. He was a perfect person to kind of play your last year for. Coach Robinson said, listen, you guys have earned the right. I want to stay out of your way. I want to make this special. And he certainly did, so I was really, everybody connects me with Coach V, having played for him for 3 years and him being the reason I came. But on the tail end, I can't thank Coach Les Robinson for what he did and really taking a very difficult situation and making it special for a senior year.
As you and I speak right now, it is roughly 1 month after Father's Day. So instead of putting Christopher Jr. and Tommy and Annabelle and Hugo on the spot and wondering, whether they connected with Dad a month ago, probably today by text instead of sending a card. I don't know how that works. Let me ask you to flash back to your dad, because I'll never forget, in one of the greatest moments, I would assume, of your career, jerseys going up into the rafters. Dad is 61-ish years old and dying of cancer, essentially. And if I remember correctly, he's like, if I have to crawl to Raleigh, I'm going to watch my son's jersey go. So, I mean, I'm not trying to get you emotional. Your dad's no longer with us, obviously. But what can you share about just his role in your life and maybe how that contributed to your kind of capacity as the super dad that I've seen you be?
Yeah, I'll tell you, David, one of the greatest moments of my life was that day. But before that, I ended up getting a phone call from Coach Robinson saying that Rodney and I were going to have our jerseys honored and raised to the rafters. At that point, my father knew he had cancer and knew he had 6 months to live. And my dad kept saying, all I want to do, I want to be there for that moment. And so as he was failing with his health, we were getting closer to that date. And it was kind of like a race against time. And my brother, my sister, and my mom were all planning on flying up on Saturday morning to go to the ceremony before the game on that Saturday. And that Friday night, my brother called me and he said, I don't think Dad can make it. He's really not doing well. And I was heartbroken because I knew how much he wanted to be there. And then I got a phone call Saturday morning saying, hey, we're jumping on a plane. Dad wants to be there. And the unbelievable thing about that was my dad at this point was shriveled. He was in a wheelchair. He had oxygen on 24/7 and really wasn't doing well. And as the family started making their way to the court, my dad said he wanted to walk, and he took the oxygen off with my brother and sister's help, was out there at mid-court with me. And it's one of those moments that he meant so much to me. For him to share in that was unbelievable. He ended up dying 1 week later. And my mom would often say that he wanted to hang on just for that. So when I walk in to the arena and I glance up at the jersey, it's not what I did for that. It's kind of what my dad meant to that. He raised me, he taught me. So it's kind of like a team jersey up there. But one of the great moments, that I will never, ever forget.
We all have theories of what we took from our mom or our dad or a different mentor. You're a glass half full kind of guy, and I've read that was at least part of who your dad, Gabe, really was. Just, this a ray of sunshine and always looking at the optimistic side of things.
Yeah, I'll tell you, David, the one, he taught me basketball at a young age. He taught me how to become a man. He taught me so many things. The one thing and the most important thing that he taught me was at the end of his life, not to fear dying. As a kid, you're growing up, you don't want to die. And my father, when he was ill in his last few weeks, he just said, listen, I'm going to heaven. I'm happy. This is great. Was never complained about where he was with his cancer. He was ready for the next chapter of his life. So, your father teaches you so much, but at the very end, to teach you not to be afraid of dying, what more can you ask for a father to bring to the table?
One other way you and I are on somewhat similar paths, besides the fact that you have incredible athletic ability and I really don't, I kind of topped out at about 16 years old as a pitcher, is we're at least in the process of becoming empty nesters at the same time. So I think I've met all four of your children. Where does that stand, and how is that changing your life as a business person? Your kids never stop needing you, obviously, but they need you in different ways and sometimes less frequently. sometimes for bigger things, but less frequently in their 20s and after that.
Yeah, no, it's my youngest, Hugo, is a freshman at NC State.
Okay.
And my daughter graduated from Alabama, and she's in Charleston. And my two older boys are in Charlotte. And my oldest son has a son named Bryce, after Bryce Harper.
You're a grandpa.
Yep, I'm a pop. Yeah.
Pop.
Yeah. So it's been great. You really do. You enjoy that time. You also miss them being around all the time. I got remarried about a year ago, so my wife Lisa and I were enjoying having a lot of time to do things and travel and spend time together. But yeah, you mentioned it, is that just because they're out of the house doesn't mean you stop parenting. And I've got a great example. My oldest son works for my company, Tryon Title. He's been with the company 5 years. So he's on 100% commission. First month of work, he gets his paycheck, not a whole lot because he's just getting started. Second month, does a few more deals, calls me up and he says, Dad, you shorted me on pay 2 months in a row, and I can't let you go. I can't let this be a thing down the road. And I said, what's the problem? He says, I was supposed to get, X, and I got about 20% less. And I said, that's taxes. I said, you're paying for roads and construction. You've got to give back to the government. So you're always teaching them about life and how to get insurance and how to save money. It's as you said, it's bigger things. You're not changing diapers anymore, but you're doing a lot of other things, and it never ends.
And for those who may be piecing this together, and you correct me if I get any of this wrong, Christopher Jr., who we called Deuce when he was an intern at the David Glenn Show, was a Wolfpack basketball player. Tommy was a South Carolina basketball player. You mentioned Annabelle, the Alabama grad, and now Hugo, a new Wolfpacker, if you will, for those keeping score at home, as you say. You did play more than 100 NBA games. I imagine you watched the NBA. You had this dream in the back of your head of what it would look like if you get there, which you did. Did the reality match the dream? Were you disappointed? Was it like just one big lap of luxury that we like to think about? And how did it end up comparing to your 8 years overseas?
It was interesting. I got drafted the 36th pick, and so it was in the second round. And when I got drafted, there was 3 guaranteed point guards on the roster, and I knew I was going to have a difficulty making the team. Went to camp, did not perform well at all. And I remember Coach Matty Gukas calling me in and telling me that, this was going to be my last day. And I stopped and I said, Coach Gukas, I want to thank you for the opportunity. I also want you to tell me what I need to work on in order to play in this league. And we had about a 25, 30-minute discussion. I ended up going on my way, went to play for the Raleigh Bullfrogs, which was a tremendous time. About a month and a half later, I get a call from my agent that I'm being called up with the Magic, and end up having to fly out to Denver, and I ended up starting. So my 3 years, I had one start. It was the first game I ever played, and I really enjoyed that year. And then the following year, I was with Orlando, and I remember having a conversation with Matt Gukas. We had just beaten Chicago, first time the Magic ever won in Chicago, and Shaquille O'Neal's on the team, and went to the bar, at the hotel, and I was always wanting to ask him. And I said, Coach Gukas, why did you call me up? Why me? And he said, Chris, I wanted to give you an opportunity because of the way you handled your exit interview. Your exit interview, usually people are so angry, they're mad at me. You wanted to know how you could get to this league, and I wanted to give you an opportunity. So I try to tell my kids, other kids I talk to, when you have defeat or you do get let go, how do you handle that? When you have adversity, do you handle it the right way? Because in my case, it ended up helping me get called up, I would have never had an opportunity to play 3 years in the NBA. While I was there, I didn't appreciate it the way I wish I would have. I wanted to play 40 minutes a game, and I wasn't that type of player. And so I kind of took it for granted, and I didn't realize how fortunate I was until I went over to Europe for 8 years, and we were taking 8-hour bus rides and eating McDonald's, and compared to what we had in the NBA, private jets, lobster and steak, and all those things. But those 11 years taught me so much. I enjoyed the basketball aspect. I enjoyed being able to see cities in the United States that I had never seen, and countries in Europe. I tried to learn the language, the culture. So again, everything goes back to NC State. If I didn't have the opportunity at NC State, a lot of this would have never really came to fruition.
Speaking of the Wolfpack, I wanted to honor you and thank you for your visit by wearing some kind of red. I know this is not exactly Wolfpack red, but it is a Phillies jersey, and I don't even wear a lot of jerseys. Remind us how the South Florida kid via Raleigh, North Carolina, and NC State not only ended up as a Philadelphia Phillies Major League Baseball fan, but from what I can tell, you take at least semi-occasional journeys up there to see the Phillies at Citizens Bank Park.
Yeah, we absolutely do. I'm a huge Phillies fan. My whole family, all my kids are. My mom and dad are from South Jersey. Okay. And dad went to the University of Miami and ended up graduating, becoming a teacher and basketball coach. So we lived 9 months in Miami, and then he didn't have work in the summer. So we would go up. He was a milkman.
Nice.
3 months at the shore. We would go to ball games and just love it. The old vet.
Yeah.
And we would watch those teams, and down at the shore, it was always on the radio, or we were watching it was always on TV. It was like, we would stay at my grandmother's house, and it was like a revolving door, and everybody was Phillies fans. And I just kind of carried that throughout. When I did have kids, I would bring them up there. We have gone to 11 straight home openers up in Philly. We went to Game 5 of the World Series last year that they lost, but just love going up there, being a part of that, and following them. Baseball is, a lot of times in other sports and now college, you don't know what you have from one year to the next. And in baseball, a lot of times those guys are signing long deals, and you get to see them grow as players, and you get to follow them. And the Phillies have a certain grit about them that I really love, and they got some work to do this year, David, but they're right in the thick of things. And we got Trey Turner there.
Yes, I knew you'd mention that.
He's batting 250, and we know he's a lot better than that.
Yeah.
So I think he's going to have a huge second half, and hopefully the Phillies will get one of those wild card spots.
All right, Corch, I could talk to you all day, but I'm going to get you out of here with the lightning round. It's brought to you by King Neptune Restaurant and Jimmy's Bar in Wrightsville Beach. The next time any viewer, listener, Corch, me, is in the Wilmington area, we hope you and we will plan to have a weekend brunch or an insanely tasty dinner, best of the beach style, with our good friends Jimmy Galeese and his amazing wife, Keaton. What they have done with that restaurant, King Neptune, how it looks after renovations, how delicious the food is, how cool the people are, how perfect the vibe is. It is a sight to behold. Corch, here's your lightning round, short as you need to be. Place the following in order of your personal preference: beach house, lake house, mountain house, since we have all three options here in North Carolina.
Beach, lake, mountain.
All-time favorite family trip or trips outside the United States, which in your case, man, that's probably a long list.
Positano, Italy.
Ooh, I just got back from 2 weeks in Italy myself. That's a good call. How about a few of your favorite bands or musicians over the years?
Bruce Springsteen and the Steve Miller Band.
Nice. Rod Brindamore last week had Springsteen, I think, at the top of his list as well. Do you have a favorite actor, actress, author, artist, any of those categories?
John Grisham, the writer.
Nice.
Bruce Willis, the actor.
Nice. And how about the last one? Eastern barbecue with the vinegar, Western barbecue with the tomatoey, ketchupy aspect, bacon, or another pork product, because we are sponsored by the North Carolina Pork Council?
Definitely Eastern by far, hands down. I also want to say I ate at King Neptune's last Saturday.
Did you?
Fabulous. One of the best meals I've had in a long time.
Man, I appreciate you mentioning that. The next time you're there, if you find Jimmy or Keaton, they work hard, so they don't always have time, but they walk around the tables. Just as I describe you as one of the best people I know, they fit that category as well. So it'd be cool to see y'all get together. And I owe you a meal. If I can get you to King Neptune, and I'd love to meet your wife, and I'd love to see your kids again. But I guess that becomes a big bill eventually. But I'd be happy to pick up the tab, man. Thanks for this extended visit. Honestly, I could talk to you for an hour at a time, but I appreciate your generosity with your time and your 137th visit on the David Glenn Show.
DG, you're first class, and when you asked me to come on, it was easy. Really, really respect everything that you've done over the years. So thank you for having me on.
Thank you, my friend. You're good to go to your next appointment. I'm going to close us out with some quick thoughts. Of course, that's Chris Corchiani. Still, to this day, one of the leading assist men in NCAA history.
I had good
teammates.
I had good teammates, David.
I know. You always defer. You always do, and I respect that. It's just crazy. I mean, I don't even know the numbers. It's fair to say millions of people at this point have played Division I men's basketball. Court's still one of the leading assist men in NCAA history. He will always be that final point guard for the legendary coach Jim Valvano at NC State. Thanks to Corch for joining the North Carolina Sports Network for the first time and for joining the DG Show for seriously the dozens and dozens of time. I appreciate that, man. Next week, of course, we will have another edition of the David Glenn Show, and we are headed to Charlotte, North Carolina, and the 3-day ACC kickoff event with all 14 head coaches and dozens of star players in attendance. I know the star quarterback at UNC, for example, Drake May, will be among the Tar Heel representatives, among the players. Of course, we'll also see UNC's Mac Brown coming off a 9-win campaign, a guy who's a national champion during his time with the Texas Longhorns, and also the author of some of the greatest UNC teams in history. Back when he was there in the 1990s, he had back-to-back top 10 finishes with the Tar Heels, 9 wins last year before a difficult finish. NC State's Dave Doran, of course, will be there. He's coming off another 8-win campaign. Mike Elko of Duke, 9 wins with the Blue Devils last year in his debut in Durham. Dave Clawson, I consider the greatest football coach in Demon Deacons football history, and really one of the sharpest guys that I've met in college football over the years. Clemson's Dabo Sweeney has been a regular guest on the David Glenn Show in its various forms for more than a decade. He, of course, has led the Clemson Tigers to 2 national championships and 7 of the last 8 ACC championships. I know this will sound like an exaggeration, but even at only 53 years old, Dabo Sweeney, in my opinion, is already up there with the likes of the late Florida State coach Bobby Bowden, among the greatest coaches in ACC football history. Florida State's Mike Norvell will be among the other coaches there. Of course, everybody but Notre Dame, still a football independent, will be represented in Charlotte next week. Coach Norvell, if we were talking about him or to him a year ago, he might have been part of the hot seat conversation, because in his first 2 years in Tallahassee, a place where, remember, in 2013, that's only a decade ago, the Seminoles won the football national championship under Jimbo Fisher. They actually won 3 straight ACC football championships, 3 in a row, before Dabo kind of really got the Clemson dynasty rolling. So Florida State, of course, has the national championship tradition. They have those relatively recent 3 ACC football championships. Fast forward from the hot seat conversation a year ago, when Mike Norvell had only won, I think, 8 or 9 games total in his first 2 seasons with the Seminoles. Last year was his breakthrough at FSU. He had 10 wins. The Seminoles finished with a top 10 national ranking. They seem poised to challenge Clemson and everybody else for ACC supremacy this year. We will catch up with as many of those coaches again, with the focus, of course, always on the great state of North Carolina, but those that impact the leagues and the teams that we follow as well, including regular guests like a Tony Bennett of UVA on the basketball side over the years, but also Dabo Sweeney on the football side, the dynasty signature man of the Clemson Tigers. We'll get to Mike Houston of ECU. We'll get to the great tradition of App State, the Charlotte 49ers, another FBS program within our state boundaries of recent vintage. The Mountaineers and the 49ers, relatively recent converts to FBS. We'll catch up with all of those folks over due time, but we're looking forward to our trip to Charlotte next week. 2 quick shout outs as we say goodbye until next time. 1, special thanks to our friend Matt Lewis and all the good folks at Sport Clips, the most recent sponsor on a quickly growing list of sponsors, fortunately, to join us here at the North Carolina Sports Network and the New Look David Glenn Show. Maybe you saw the before and after photos of my fresh cut. Now, as they said in the radio business, I have a face for radio. That's okay. Don't blame Sport Clips for that. But I would be either a more handsome or a less ugly version of myself after getting the fresh cut at Sport Clips. I always get the MVP treatment. Those before and after photos I posted at David Glenn Show on Twitter, those were real. And just from, I think, last Friday maybe, I always get the MVP treatment with the tingly shampoo, the barbershop style hot towel treatment on your face, the relaxing neck and shoulder rub. That's what they call the MVP treatment that I go for every time. I pick up a lot of products for my son and me as well. Soon after I created the ACC Sports Journal and ACCsports.com back in the 1990s, Sport Clips was actually among the original sponsors of that magazine website combination, which was very successful for more than 2 decades, including a long stretch where I was the owner of the magazine and the website. I will always remember Sport Clips for being among my first sponsors when I was a young business owner, small family-owned business. Fast forward to the summer of 2023, we are thankful once again to have Sport Clips, now with more than 70 North Carolina locations, as an awesome partner with our latest venture, the North Carolina Sports Network. ncsportsnetwork.com is our brand new website. And of course, this rebooted, if you will, version of the David Glenn Show. Final shout out to the original Salt Works in Wilmington. Just as I was down there and speak incredibly highly of King Neptune, as Chris Corchiani just did, Mike Waddell of the North Carolina Sports Network actually had, I think, a breakfast and a lunch and purchased some T-shirts and had an all-around good time at the original Salt Works in Wilmington. This is a legendary place there in one of our state's bigger cities and our only really big city at the beach, which is my favorite thing about it. It's famous and legendary for its breakfast, its brunch, or its lunch. It is actually celebrating its 50th birthday this year. So special thanks to our friend Bob Hubbard, who's been running the show at Salt Works for at least the last 20 years or so. He has been another longtime supporter of the DG show in various ways over the years. Last thing, don't forget, I know I have to repeat this. I apologize for the repetition, but it's very important. Please subscribe to our official YouTube channel, Instagram, and Twitter accounts. All of those here at the North Carolina Sports Network, you can remember with the handle the NC Sportsnet at the THE at the NC Sportsnet. Those are our social media handles. Again, the website is a little different. NC Sports Network, the full word network, ncsportsnetwork.com. When you subscribe to our YouTube channel, for example, remember it is free. It is as easy as clicking the subscribe button right next to the video box where you're seeing me right now. It's that simple and it's free, no obligation. You are automatically eligible. You're not only helping us sustain this new business model in a very complicated time, as you probably have read, for the media in general or the sports media in particular, by subscribing to us at the YouTube channel at the NC Sportsnet. You're automatically eligible for very cool prizes, including free tickets to upcoming college and pro sporting events, free concert tickets you can attend with or without me, the way last week's winners joined my wife, the lovely and talented Maria, and me at the Michael Franti concert in Wilmington. You don't have to take me. Of course, I would see why you would want to take my wife and not take me, but that might require some negotiation. Free rounds of golf, again, with or without me. You don't need a weekend warrior hacker messing up your golf round, courtesy of the North Carolina Sports Network, unless you just might enjoy my company, and I'm making no assumptions along those lines, or free dinners at some of North Carolina's best restaurants. Again, with or without me. We did the couples thing with some new viewers and subscribers this past weekend. It could be you and a friend, or depending on the details, you and 3 friends. Just remember, you can't win unless you're subscribed to our YouTube channel here at the NC Sportsnet. Okay, that'll do it for today's edition of the program. The David Glenn Show is an exclusive production of the North Carolina Sports Network. Executive producer, Mike Waddell. Technical director, and special thanks in Wilmington to J.R. Quitman, the former NC State football player, pushing the right buttons and behind the curtain again today. The founding partner of NCSN is the North Carolina Pork Council. Goodbye, everybody. Thanks for spending some time with us today. We look forward to seeing you again from Charlotte next week.